On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, OG Anunoby finally makes an all-defense team. We'll dig into why it was extremely deserved and why OG might be just the clear number one defensive player in the history of the Toronto Raptors. Plus, what does this mean for the summer and the Raptors' plans with OG going forward? All that and much more on today's episode. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, May the 10th. Happy birthday, Dad! I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Twitter at WoodleySean. You can also go follow the show on Instagram, Locked On Raptors. And most importantly, join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord community, which is super fun. Like 50, 60 folks in there right now talking ball, whether it's the playoffs, Raptors stuff, trades, off-season machinations. It's all in there, and it's super fun, very friendly. Not the sort of angry disagreement you get in most other corners of Raptors internet, I'm finding. So come hang out. It's really fun. Even when you disagree kindly in the Locked On Raptors Discord community. It's a lot of fun. Jump on in, please. Okay, on today's show, we're going to get into the OG Anunoby news that he has won or made second team all defense. Didn't win. I guess you don't win all defense. You're sharing it, whatever. Anyway, OG Anunoby is a second team all defensive player. We will dig into what it means for the Raptors going forward as it pertains to extension talks. Got a couple of listener questions, a couple OG tie-ins with those questions at the end of the show. And of course, off the top, we'll dig into just why it was so bloody deserved and overdue for OG to finally get recognized as one of the best defensive players in the NBA. He's been that for a long time, but it's nice to have it now on paper. You love that on paper. Before we get into all that, though, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Game Time. All right, let's get to it. On today's show, like I said, digging into OG's all-defense win. Comes down yesterday pretty comfortably, gets onto the all-defensive second team, beat out Mikal Bridges by like 50 voting points. He was very comfortably in that second team. Didn't flirt with first team. And look, the first team freaking stacked. Like Alex Caruso, Drew Holiday, very easy guard picks. Those were my guard picks as well. Actually, I thought overall the voting was pretty damn good and pretty representative of the best defensive players in the league this year. So no real complaints there. The forwards, you get Jaren Jackson Jr. and Evan Mobley. They're more bigs than forwards. You could make an argument that both should have been available at center on this ballot, and I think they might have been. But obviously, you can't not have Jaren Jackson Jr. on the first team. He's the best defensive player in the league, per minute at least. Brook Lopez got the first team center spot, and Mobley versus OG is a debate, I'm sure, but obviously Mobley was the anchor of the best defense in basketball this season, so we'll give it to him. That's fine. And OG slides in there on the second team next to Dillon Brooks. That's funny. Dillon Brooks can get paid by someone this summer. He's a very good defender, as much as all the other stuff that comes with him is a thing to be considered. But yeah, I think, this was an undeniable thing. OG was one of the best defensive players in the league this year, and I think if you kind of just look at the way the voting shook out, it seems like the league agrees he's just the best wing defender, period, in the NBA. And, obviously Dillon Brooks has a say in that, made this all-defense team, but you look at the first team, yes, Drew Holiday's a wing defender, yes, he can guard all over the place, that's very good, but obviously more skewed towards the guards in that situation. OG guards everybody, and he does it at a position where, he's going to have size disadvantages at times, whether it's smaller, quicker guys that he's trying to contain, which he does well, or bigger bruising dudes, which he also contains very well, is what makes OG incredible. He is, I think, the best wing defender in basketball, and it seems as though the voting reflects that. Jaren Jackson Jr., Evan Mobley, they're bigs. Like, they're not wing defenders. Yes, they were forwards on the ballot, but that's just semantics. OG rocks. And, there's lots of different ways to get to the conclusion that OG's an all-defense player. Obviously, a lot of those ways were taken by the voters here. There's the sort of the counting stats thing, led the league in steals both per game and total. Like that's awesome. Like that's probably what gave him such a cushion over the guys behind him in the voting is, and the thing he's lacked in seasons past, where he's not gotten all defense when perhaps it was deserved, is he didn't have the counting stats. He, a steal a game, that type of thing. Now he gets up to near 2 steals a game and is, putting up 4, 5, 6 steal games kind of routinely. That's the stuff that's going to catch the attention of voters who are just simply not watching the Raptors play every day, which you can't blame them for that. No one can watch every team all the time, but those counting stats really help when people are going through and the voting and all this. It's like, oh, well, the steals, he must be great at defense. Let's vote for him. That's just kind of the way it goes. So very wise on OG's part to rack up the steals in that way to set himself up to get this recognition. You get a little deeper and nerdier with it as well. Dunks and Threes, great website, has him as the 3rd most impactful defender per 100 possessions in basketball this past year. 3.3 points added per 100 points or per 100 possessions on defense. That's behind only Alex Caruso and Dennis Smith Jr., who had a stealthy good defensive season when he was in there. Missed a lot of time injured-wise, but really, really impressive stuff. 3rd in that metric. Obviously, all these metrics are different. They paint guys differently. ESPN's defensive box plus minus doesn't paint a very good picture of OG at all. That's probably tied more to those times where he was playing with those hemorrhaging points, second units, and all of that stuff. All these numbers, they come with their own good stuff and bad stuff and sort of the formulaic, thought that goes into it. But also, Crafted NBA, another great site that I like to use a lot that sort of paints the picture of versatility in the NBA, it paints OG wonderfully as well. They have a versatility metric that also weaves in matchup difficulty to kind of create 2 numbers. OG finished 5th in the league per Crafted NBA in matchup difficulty, and 98 out of 100 was his versatility rating. He played everywhere. The only guy on the, sort of actually one of the only guys ahead of him in this metric was Scottie Barnes, who had a 100 versatility rating, which is very funny. His matchup difficulty, not quite the same height of OG's. And if you run through all of the sort of guys who have the highest degree of versatility, there's just no one that matches up eye test wise with what OG does defensively. You run through the list. Scottie Barnes, number 1 in versatility. OG, better defender, basically in every facet than Scottie Barnes is right now. Maybe like a help side rim protection, Scottie's got him beat a tad, but that's something to be mind for the future more than it is a strength right now. Nick Batum, obviously, very good defensive player, very versatile, but he's not going and bodying up Nikola Jokic effectively the way OG Anunoby does. Neither is Hamidou Diallo or even Jason Tatum, who, yes, he's had some moments in the playoffs guarding Joel Embiid. Hasn't gone terribly well when that's happened. Not to say it would go well OG guarding Joel Embiid, but, that's something they've gone to in the past in a pinch, and it's not been the worst thing in the world. Dorian Finney-Smith, Buddy Hield, Aaron Nesmith round out the top 8 or 9 guys here in overall versatility. And none of those guys are guarding all 5 spots. Yes, they can guard a few spots. Nesmith, Hield, they'll go 1, 2, 3. They're not very good defenders, but like their matchup difficulty is way low in this regard per Crafted NBA. But they'll play all over the place. The Pacers, just because they only play guards, I think the numbers are kind of juiced up there because you have guards playing the 4 regularly for them, and so that kind of makes that number kind of pop a little bit more. But again, none of those guys are guarding the people that OG guards. No one in the league, I think, this season, you could say, had stretches of shutting down Trae Young and also shutting down or slowing down as much as you can slow him down Nikola Jokic. But that's the spectrum of what OG does with his defense. It's unbelievable. And I do think this second team nomination, not that he needed it necessarily to prove it, but I do think this locks in OG as the greatest defender in the history of the Toronto Raptors. And look, it's not exactly a storied history of great defense. There was like 20 years there where they just didn't play defense at all for any period of time with any of the rosters they had. They were all offense when they were successful. Most of the time, no offense nor defense. That was Raptors fandom for a long time. Obviously, Kawhi was the first Raptor to make an all-defense team. But I think if you watched that season, yes, the reputation got him the votes there, but he was like the 4th or 5th best defender on that Raptors team. You had OG, Pascal was a really good defender then, Kyle was kind of at his peak, obviously Marc Gasol, Danny Green, like that was a stacked defensive team. Kawhi got the nod because Kawhi's the famous guy who's got the big hands and made no-look interceptions of passes from Jimmy Butler, etc., etc. He's incredible, but I'd still take OG over Raptors Kawhi in like a single defensive possession, I think. And then you go back all the way, Marcus Camby, Doug Christie, like Keon Clark. These are the types of guys we're talking about as the best defenders in Raptors history. There was the stretch there. Obviously, Marc Gasol is incredible. He was instrumental to winning the championship. He's on the short list as well. I would say, going back a little further, I mean, Patrick Patterson somehow like one of the better defenders the Raptors have had. Like that's nuts. It's been a pretty fallow period for defenders for the Raptors for most of their existence. And OG comes out, I think, as the clear number one. He's just so bloody good. He's an absolute treat to watch in that end. The way he can do it against any type of opposing player. The thing about basketball is different guys have different skill sets and styles, and it's supposed to create certain matchups where they find success. I don't know if there's a single player who has found success against OG's style of defense. It's just all-encompassing and smothering. And yes, guys will get off and have their nights against him. Sure, they get hot, but it's not because they didn't work for it. It's not because OG let them get there easy. He's incredible and is an absolute delight. And this season, we talked on Monday about the things that were sort of the best parts of this season. I had OG's kind of close to the year, which was very offense-focused, I think, the way he played off Jakob Poeltl, but OG's defense, like start to finish this season, an absolute marvel. We haven't seen anything like it in Raptors history, and it's a super deserved second team All-NBA nod for OG. Congrats, OG, and we're going to get into what it means now going forward. And, extensions, does this factor into his potential extension this summer? I think it makes it a little bit less likely, actually, that the Raptors will be able to lock him into an extension this summer. We'll get to that and why OG should probably be part of the solution here if they can make it happen going forward, and how I've kind of taken a 180 from the trade deadline to now with OG. We'll get to that, and I'll eat some crow in just one sec. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. And look, buying tickets to sporting events should be fun, exciting, and exhilarating, but oftentimes it's just way too bloody stressful. You're trying to find the right price. You're going through multiple apps, trying to find a deal that works for you. All of it feels like it's marked up. Game Time is the place for you to go to buy tickets for your favorite events in a stress-free way with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you're going to have. And all of these wonderful things come with Game Time. They have the Game Time guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That is an incredible promise. You can get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect before you sit down, and you can buy your tickets in a matter of seconds, just a couple of taps, and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you don't got to do the thing where you dig through your email at the door holding up the line behind you either. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we continue on here with your first listen of the day. Thanks as always to the everyday listeners of the podcast. You are wonderful folks. And actually, I have a message to pass along from one of the wonderful everydayers out there. One of you, to all the other everydayers and sickos who love the show, is in need of some help and some support. Charlie Bender is a wonderful listener of the podcast. He reached out today. He is doing a walk for Crohn's and colitis, and IBD in general. He was recently diagnosed, has a piece, let's drop the link in the description, digging into what the diagnosis has meant for him. And there is a walk going down later June the 4th that Charlie will be taking part in. He's looking for pledges, and let's help out one of our pals, shall we? I'll drop the link in the description so you can help Charlie and support his walk for Crohn's, colitis, and IBD. Shout out to Charlie. We love you, one of our everydayers. All right, let's continue on here with OG talk, shall we? The offseason now looms big with OG. This is something the Raptors got to get right, and it's just like another thing on their plate this summer that they've set themselves up with, just with the way their contracts are structured, with the free agency they've got, the coaching firing. There's a lot for the Raptors to sort out this summer. They're one of the most interesting teams in the NBA for all these reasons, and maybe you would argue these are the wrong reasons, that you don't want them to be having to sort through all these things. In a more stable organization, headed in a better direction, wouldn't have all this stuff to sort through. Again, I think there's a real world chance that they figure it out and thread the needle and everything is looking fine in a few months' time, but there's a chance that things blow up. OG factors into this big time. Obviously, not one of the pending free agents for the Raptors this year, but he is a pending free agent after next season, as he'll be able to opt out of his deal. And that's like, there's a lot to sort through here for the Raptors. Like, there's obviously the plenty of rumors and scuttlebutt about, is OG happy with his role in Toronto? Does he want to be here? I have an inkling that moving on from Nick Nurse will probably help smooth over a lot of that stuff. You get a new coach in, reimagine, the way the team plays. I think OG's fit down the end of the season. The role he had where he was just bloody efficient on like pretty decent usage, big part of the offense, not a fulcrum of it or anything like that, just a guy who could be an opportunist and score off of the leverage of everybody else. That's really great. And I think, like I said on Monday when we were talking about OG's close to the season, like that's the optimized role for OG in the NBA right now, right? And obviously he's going to have higher designs, I'm sure, and want to do more, as every player in the NBA probably does. But like that is just such a peak version of OG that we saw down the stretch of the season that I would love if they could maintain that relationship and keep that version of OG just as the version of OG that we see over the next few years. Obviously sprinkle in a little bit more in terms of on-ball stuff as he levels up and all this stuff. I don't think he's ever going to be a primary apex predator wing who's got the ball in his hands all the time, but the odd flourishes of secondary creation, certainly possible for him as he is a walking paint touch. And what happens when he gets to the paint, a little bit dicier, but certainly can get himself there because he's just stronger than everybody else. When it comes to his extension, I think the all-defense nod makes it less likely that the Raptors will be able to lock him in this summer. Of course, with the new CBA rules and the 40% increase allowable on extensions as opposed to the 20%, which was the previous rule, the Raptors are going to be able to offer OG about $26 million a year as a starting salary. And that might come in a little below what his value is going to be. If you can get him on that, incredible. That's going to age as one of the best contracts in basketball as the cap goes up in the coming years, I would estimate. I just don't think you're going to be able to get him at that. If you can, amazing. You offer it to him this summer. The first second you can, you put it on the table and say, hey, OG, we love you. We value you. We wish you could offer you more, or maybe you don't say that because that's poor negotiating, but here is the max amount of money we can give you. Obviously, there are rules and stuff, so we can't go above this, but this is the max amount of money. Please take it. I feel like the conversation that happens in the summer. I would guess OG and his representation probably want to ride this one out to free agency where he can earn more money. And there's obviously there's the regular, 30% cap on what you can make of the cap or whatever, but he'll be able to make more money than that $26 million starting salary if he were to sign that extension. That opens up, if he doesn't want it, do you have to look at trading him? And that really scares me. Obviously, at the deadline, I was tooting the horn. I think you should trade OG. I think you should trade him for whatever big offer comes in. With information that came in, it doesn't sound like any of the offers that came. While it's like, oh, Memphis offered 3 first-round picks, it doesn't sound as though those were good first-round picks or, they were heavily protected, blah, 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 blah. All this posturing goes on. We don't know what actually happened. We just kind of get the leaks that come out from either side. We don't know which side they come from, all of that. But it seems as though the offers weren't quite there to really kind of cash in and get the massive haul for OG that you thought you might be able to get. Maybe you can get it at the draft. That's the reason I wasn't super upset they didn't pull the trigger at the deadline was that the draft comes around. There are going to be a lot of very disappointed basketball teams that have just lost in the playoffs. And I think that's proving true and will continue to prove true as more teams bow out here. Maybe there's a world in which OG at the draft fetches you a massive return from a desperate team. Or maybe he is used as part of a trade for a potentially disgruntled star. Jaylen Brown. That's a possibility as well. And so I think not trading him at the deadline for like a poo-poo platter of picks probably ends up being a good call here, not only because it creates more flexibility if they do want to trade him at the draft, but also because it keeps him on the team, which should maybe be just what they want to do. And maybe OG is just part of the solution here. And the reason I say this, and look, I think what's most likely is the Raptors mostly run it back this summer, as disappointing as it's going to be for people. I think for the most part, they will run it back, and then with the more cost certainty they have on the roster, guys locked in on longer term deals, they can kind of make their big decisions before next summer when the cap crunch really hits, when Pascal's new deal in theory comes in, OG's new deal, Precious's extension comes in, if there is an extension or a new deal that comes by then. So all that's kind of lingering there in 2024. You sign your guys, you bring it back this year, you use next season as a sort of last ditch figuring it out time. See what Scottie Barnes brings in year 3. See if you can, with a new coach, create something a little bit more harmonious than you had last year. And then you can make your big sweeping decisions on the core in a year's time. That said, maybe they end up having to make a call this summer. If OG is inkling that or hinting at not coming back or whatever, then that kind of forces your hand. Ultimately, I think if there are moves this summer, OG's like maybe the last one that should happen. And this is coming from me, the most devout Pascal Siakam supporter in the world, who does not want to see him dealt, and I don't think he will be dealt, but I don't want to see it either. But ultimately, I think if you are trading parts from this team, big core pieces, I think OG probably has to be the most untouchable outside of Scottie Barnes right now, and it's not because he's the most talented player on the team. And normally I'm like fully on keep the most talented guys here, but fit matters, and OG's fit next to Scottie Barnes is impeccable. He fits next to anybody, and that's the thing, is it's really easy to build a roster, build lineups with OG Anunoby. He can slide between the 2 and the 4. He can play anywhere, and he shoots threes. That's never going out of style. That's never out of place on an NBA floor. And so as much as I don't see any big sweeping trades coming this summer, I could see maybe the Raptors looking at the fit situation and saying, hey, Pascal's the guy to move here. OG we keep because of the fit. I don't love necessarily keeping for fit, but OG fits because he's so unique and singular as a player that if you just traded that dude away, this was the thing going into the deadline as well that I was very mindful of and cognizant of. Like, you trade OG, there's a very real chance for the next 15 years you're regretting it badly. And I think the way he closed the season, the way he fit with Jakob Poeltl, the way he just really popped, and 64% true shooting after the deadline, incredible. Like, the way he closed the year made me maybe renege on my thoughts that he should be traded as sort of the next move for this franchise to move forward. I think he's got to be part of the solution. He's really bloody good, and I think it was probably a little sort of like desperation sign of the times. The deadline's coming, you got to do something, like all those feelings that kind of went into thinking he should be dealt. But with the benefit of hindsight, that might have been a really bad idea. And having OG trying to maintain that relationship, keeping it around long term as a member of the Scottie Barnes version of the Raptors, I think is probably what you got to try to aim for here if you're the Raptors, because that's just a player you're not replacing. He's a one-of-one type of player, a singular defender, the best of wing defender in basketball right now, I think is a pretty fair assessment there. And you trade that guy, not lightly, I guess is sort of the way I'd put it. We're going to come back on the other side and get to a couple of listener questions. We got one on OG. We got a couple of honorable mentions for the best things that happened this year as well that got thrown into the Discord. So we'll get to that in just one sec. Before we do that, however, go listen to Locked On Leafs. Tonight might be the funeral for your Toronto Maple Leafs. Go and check out the preview of Game 4 and all that's gone wrong, the reflections on what's gone wrong with Locked On Leafs. Mike and Dave doing an excellent job breaking it all down. Go support Locked On Leafs wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, let's close it out here. Listener questions came in from the Discord. Always, the Discord's the place to go to get your questions answered, baby. Go do it. So, question here from Arthur08 asking, does having a new coach improve OG's chances of being back? I think yes, and he'll be back, I think, regardless. Obviously, he's got the year left on his contract. Maybe they trade him because he's an impending free agent, all that. But I do think the chances of OG kind of being reincorporated in a more prominent role, or as prominent a role he had to close the season just on a more harmonious and happy basketball team, I think those chances are pretty high. I think it was pretty clear, it seems pretty clear right now, that things got really spoiled within the Raptors locker room by the end of the year. And I do think the Nick Nurse firing is going to go down as like a pretty significant shift in the way the sort of locker room operates. I mean, obviously not in there, not seeing it all the time, but just kind of the inferences you get, the sort of the quotes, the sort of subtle between the lines stuff. It seems as though the Nick Nurse thing really soured by the end. And I think you just kind of get some fresh life in there, a new voice, and that's probably going to make things a little bit more copacetic with OG. You would hope, and hopefully the role he had down the stretch where he was like literally one of the very best role players, quote unquote, like a very much a star in his role, but one of the best role players in all of basketball, the type of guy who was going to be on very good teams that are playing deep into the playoffs for a very long time. He's a guy who's on championship teams. That's the type of player OG is. And I think working him back in with a new coach, reimagining the team a little bit, maybe there's a little bit more offensive creativity for him allowed, we'll see. But I think that's going to make a pretty significant difference. So I feel better about OG's chances of being back now that the coaching situation has been changed. We'll see who they hire, obviously. Maybe they bring in just like a really mean person and it doesn't go super well, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Next question here comes from Ben Chapman. And this ties back into our talk earlier this week about the best things that happened this year. We were talking about Pascal Siakam, his first 10 games, and how that was like one of the highlights for me of the year. And Ben asked, is the pre-Dallas injury Pascal run the best stretch of play by anyone in Raptors history? That's a really good question. I don't think I'd go quite that far. Yes, he was basically in God mode. Yes, he was playing like a heliocentric monster, putting up like, 27, 8, and 7 or something crazy like that, 27, 8, and 9 for a stretch. He was unbelievable to start the year. One of the better stretches in Raptors history, for sure. As far as overall production, that might be, it might take the cake. I think I probably take DeMar DeRozan at the start of 2017-18, where he literally broke a Michael Jordan record or tied a Michael Jordan record for most 30-point games to start a season. That was pretty special to watch. That was an incredible DeMar season, even though it ended up with him getting traded at the end of it. It was an amazing regular season for DeMar. I think he made second team All-NBA, and it was super deserved. There's the Kyle Lowry stretch. So not the same level of production as Pascal, but I think the stretch in the 1920 season, the title defense year, where Kyle is going ham with like a busted roster. I think Gasol's out, Siakam's out. They got a bunch of injuries they're dealing with. He's playing with ragtag crews. This features the game against Dallas where they come back from down 30 with 14 minutes left. This features that whole sort of run through mid to late December into January where the Raptors only go like 500-ish, but they do it all because Kyle Lowry is saving their ass every single night and giving them a chance to be in it. I think that, and then the stretch that comes after that where the Raptors really get rolling, that was some incredible Kyle Lowry ball. Like one of my favorite Lowry seasons. I also think the stretch before he gets hurt in 2016-17, obviously I think the January lull there before they made the PJ Tucker and Serge Ibaka trades wasn't the best time for Kyle, but I would say like the start of that season all the way through to when he got hurt, he should have been an All-NBA player that season. He was unreal. The numbers, it's like his best statistical season by far, just got cut short by the wrist injury, and he didn't come back till later. But yeah, Kyle's got a couple of those stretches. I think you think back as well. I mean, I'm sure Bosch had some pretty crazy runs. Obviously, Kawhi in the playoffs was just on another level of human existence that Siakam can't reach. But that Siakam stretch really is up there. And honestly, I'd put last season's close to the year as well for Siakam right in the same conversation. He was incredible. Like, very good basketball player, as it turns out, Pascal Siakam. And as much as I think that first 10 games was excellent, I don't know if I'd quite go as best stretch in Raptors history, but certainly on the short list. That, I believe, is going to do it for today's show. Thank you for the questions, Arthur and Ben. Also, a big shout out. Speaking of Ben, another member of the Discord noted, I think it was actually Ben, noted that the Fred VanVleet Ben Taylor press conference was one of our great omissions on Monday's show, digging into the best parts of the season. That was unbelievable. It was the talk of the league for a hot second, and anytime you can do swears at refs because they're bad at their jobs is, to me, very cool and good. So very good pick there, as well as a bit of a snub in the best things that happened this season conversation. With that, we'll leave the show there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Much appreciated. Again, the link is in the description. Please go and help out our pal Charlie Bender, a daily listener of the podcast who we very much love, who is taking part in the Gutsy Walk, the walk that's taking place, I believe, in the York region on June the 4th for Crohn's and colitis research. Go check it out. Support a fellow Locked On Raptors listener. We love our pal Charlie. All right, that will do it. Thank you very much. We'll be back again tomorrow, TBD on the topic tomorrow, but Friday, Rafael Barlow of Locked On NBA Big Board is going to be along, and we're going to start draft talk. We're going to dig into some of the guys available in that 13 range for the Raptors, focusing on guards mostly. But, Rafael's always got deep pulls as well, as far as guys who very much are in the Masai Ujiri mold of player, So we'll get to that for sure. Looking forward to that on Friday as we ramp up draft talk here on the show. And then Monday as well, you'll be able to tune in as Vivek, Sahal, and I dig into the over-unders for the season. Now that the all-defense teams are out, we can finally evaluate who was the best to pick an over-unders and props at the start of the year in our annual over-unders and props spectacular. Also with that, someone is winning tickets to a game next season. There's like 50 people who sent in their own submissions at the start of the year. I got to start grading those papers, baby, because the person with the best score at the end is going to win tickets to a game next season, and I am excited to hand those out as well. So stay tuned. That'll be Monday for the over-unders. We'll figure out who wins next week at some point, as it's going to take a while to grade all those, but thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you for jumping in the Discord and being a part of our community in there. And thank you, as always, for just hanging. We love hanging. Hanging's great. We'll talk soon. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you Thursday. Bye-bye.